This is the Motion Bosch Cross. It's a cross design, very much like the Evo Cross, meaning maybe a little bit more like city, urban oriented. You can see the tires are a little bit narrower, more efficient. They're kind of a 700C diameter, 700 by 35C in fact. They've got the nice reflective sidewall, but they also have this little suspension fork and kind of smooths things out, which does have lockout, so it's not super heavy. There's not a lot of adjustment like in terms of rebound and other things, but see how kind of narrow it is. It's real minimal, but definitely adds comfort. So you've got something that's kind of a capable around town bike, and it's being powered by the Bosch center drive system. So that's where the Bosch Cross name comes from. This is slightly more expensive. Well, I shouldn't say slightly more. It's more than the traditional Cross. Like the Evo Cross, that one costs like about $3,000, $29.99. This one costs $39.99, so $4,000. So for an extra $1,000, you get what, in my opinion, is a significantly better drive system. It's much better balanced. See how it's kind of mounted in the center of the frame. It's super efficient and fast. It's going to be able to take you further, much further, in fact, even though the battery size is very similar. So this is a 350 watt geared center drive system, and it measures three things in order to activate. It's measuring how fast the bike is going. You can see like a little magnet there that passes that sensor. It also measures how fast you're pedaling, so your cadence, and how hard you're pushing. So all three of those things factor in about 1,000 times per second, and that makes for just a really like instantaneous start and stop. And it actually feels pretty smooth, and part of that is because the front chainring is so small versus a traditional chainring. It's much larger, and it kind of, it goes a little bit longer, it starts a little bit slower. So this thing's like, it's very, very responsive, which is awesome, especially for off-road bikes. This one being, for more of like a kind of a city riding style, I think it works really, really well. It's almost like overkill a little bit. So you should be easily like 30 plus miles, and that's in the highest level of assist. There's no throttle, so you have to pedal on this thing to make it go, and that's part of why it can get such excellent range. We're talking like 60, 70 miles in the lower levels of assist. So it's really comes back to how you're riding it. It comes in this one size. I just measured it. This seat tube here is about 19.5 inches. They call it kind of like a medium. And that's one of the things about a lot of easy motion bikes. They come in one or two sizes, but it's somewhat adjustable with the seat post here. By the way, this is 31.6 millimeters. You could replace that with like a SR Suntour NCX suspension, or maybe like a Thud Buster, and it would add some more comfort if that front suspension isn't enough. I love full suspension bikes, even just for commuting, because the cracks and driveway potholes and stuff, they get to you after a while, especially with the thinner tires. They aren't quite as forgiving. But this is just like every person's bike. It's like gonna get you there. It's gonna do a good job. And I like that they've got these threaded eyelets on the seat stays, and then some more down here. So you could easily add a rack, turn it into more of a commuter setup if you wanted. Sometimes there are fenders that can kind of work with those designs, and there is a hole right there on the suspension fork. So you could really customize this however you wanted. And the frame in general has been customized just to fit that motor right there. It kind of replaces the whole bottom bracket. I like that they've even got kind of a rubberized dash guard thing going on, so that if you do hit a curb or maybe a stick or something, it's not going to scratch or damage the motor casing quite as much. This whole thing is mostly aesthetic anyway, but it's a cool design. It's well done. Bosch does a great job. It pulls the same chain that you pull, and what we've got back here in the rear is a Shimano Alivio 9-speed. So 9 speeds is good for getting around town. The top assisted speed on this bike is 20 miles per hour. So when you get to that level or try to go above, like the motor just kind of eases off, which is fine. Some people want to go a little bit faster, and you definitely can when you're coasting down hills or whatever. But that's 20 miles. That's kind of top speed. Decent saddle. I like the colors and stuff. I'm looking at this bike. It's one of the models at City Cycles near Vancouver, Canada. So there's a little bit of maybe like a different design and a few differences, kind of the European spec versus in America. But it's basically the same bike. I love that they've got kickstand, and it's got quick release in the rear and in the front. That's one of the big benefits of a mid-drive electric bike. 180 millimeter disc in the rear, in the front, and 160 in the rear, so a little bit smaller back here. Got the nice Shimano hydraulic levers. No motor inhibitor. You don't really need it with the Bosch system because it's so fast and so responsive. It's not using a cadence sensor, which is more like an on-off. This one's, it's just much more fluid that way. And it looks like kind of a tapered, oversized head tube there at the bottom too for just increased stiffness. Yeah, this aluminum alloy platform pedals, they work all right. Yeah, I think that's kind of a good check-in. All the Easy Motion bikes have this kind of basic flick bell for safety, which is cool. And then maybe we'll talk about the battery pack. So we talked about the motor, 350 watt. The battery is a 396 watt hour, 36 volt, 11 amp hour. It's got lithium ion cells inside. Really good stuff. It's only like 5.5 pounds, so very lightweight. Can be charged on or off the frame. You can see that little rubber flap there. That's where it plugs in. The charger's relatively light. It's under 2 pounds. It's fairly compact. When you take this off, you can carry it around pretty easily because there's like a built-in handle right there. So again, just keeping all the weight, you know, pretty well centered. I do feel like on this model in particular, there would have been room for maybe like a bottle cage adapter so that if you were thirsty, you could bring along some water. But I understand that this takes up a lot of the space, and if you have a rack, you could always put one there. It's just something I'm always thinking about when you're cruising around and it gets hot out. Okay, so we talked about the motor, we got the battery. This is the display panel that kind of activates everything, and it does swivel. This one's a little bit tight, but you know, you can kind of adjust it forward to back so that you don't get glare happening if you're riding on a sunny day. To activate it, you press this little power button, boop, and it just lights up pretty quickly actually. So the primary readouts are your battery level indicator. It's like 5 bars, it's pretty good. And then you've got your speed here. This one's set for miles per hour, it's awesome. And then your assist level over on the right. And you can navigate through the assist levels by using this remote button pad. And when you press it, it kind of clicks. So it's kind of satisfying. You can imagine you're riding along, changing how much power you get without even looking down. So we're in turbo ride mode right now. That's the highest level, and it's estimating 27 miles of range. As I arrow down and go to sport mode, now it's saying, okay, I'm closer to 30 miles. Tour, 36. Eco, 71. So you see there's a big difference in terms of how much power you're using and what kind of range the system estimates. And it's just an estimate, but I found it to be fairly accurate. You know, this is definitely one of the fancier and more accurate sort of estimators that I've seen. You can change through some of the other display sections by pressing this I button. So down at the bottom it says odometer, trip distance, clock, max speed, average speed, trip time. So you've got a lot of information here, and there's even a lights button, so that you press that, it turns on the backlighting on the display. It also would activate lights, and some of these shops can actually wire in lights for you, so they'd be running off the main battery pack instead of having to get your own. And you know, they're less convenient. You have to press the button, you forget that it's on. So I really love integrating lights if you have the money and feel like that's something you'd use a lot. And again, just the fenders and stuff, I would totally turn this into like a city bike. And being in Canada where it does rain a little bit more frequently, it's beautiful, it's green, but it's also, you get a little bit messier when you're out riding. The last thing I want to say is that this display panel is removable. It slides right off. So if you're transporting the bike or parking it at a rack outside, you can take the display off, you can take the battery off. That's going to reduce the weight even more. This thing's about 47 pounds, so it's not heavy. And it's very portable. Quick release on the wheels. So I love it. Definitely a good setup. I'm going to go ahead and hop on here, and I'm going to start out in turbo mode just to give you some idea of how fast it can go, how much power you get, and how responsive that motor is. So when I pedal, watch how quick it starts and stops. Woo. It's just right on it. It's totally responsive. I love that. It's a good feeling. It really makes you feel like you're in control when you're riding. And then the trigger shifters over there on the right, they're also just kind of what you'd expect. They stay out of the way and they do their job. So just get down here. You might be able to hear when I shift, the motor actually cuts out. it's got like shift sensing technology, so really cool. Nice. And it's actually a fairly quiet motor, but you might hear a little bit of whining when it actually starts spinning faster, just because, you know, it is geared, and that front chainring, that smaller one, it's actually spinning about twice as fast as my cranks are moving. So again, that's what makes it responsive, but that also limits the number of gears you have. You know, 9 here, there's no chain rings in the front. Woo! Nice smooth disc brakes. Love it. Yeah, so that's the Easy Motion Bosch Cross. For the full write-up on this and all the other Easy Motion bikes, I'll see you back at ElectricBikeReview.com. Feel free to chime in if you feel like maybe I've missed something here, or you have some other tips about fenders or lights or anything, and ride safe.